Hi again, guys. Today we want to pick up where we left off in our previous video. As you have probably watched it in our previous video, today I'm going to start with some more tips on pronunciation because we finished with 2 tips on pronunciation. And then we'll go on with some tips on the other 2 criteria, namely lexical resource and grammatical range and accuracy. So today's tip number 1 is the different nuances you can find in pronunciation. And the first one is the different pronunciations of T. As you probably know, we have different pronunciations, and they are stressed T, like Italian, unstressed T, like Italy, held T, like bat, cat, mat, student. We have unpronounced T, which is like the internet. And we also have the glottalized T, which is like mountain, fountain, and kitten. Of course, you can pronounce them in different ways, but if you pronounce these like what I told you, this can give the examiner the impression that you are aware of the subtle nuances of the pronunciation. Now, our next tip is the deviations in pronunciation. As you probably know, there are some deviations in pronunciation in different languages. For example, when we're speaking in Farsi, you may hear or you may even say et or at. You can say hediye or hadiye, shamal or shomal, naranj or naranj. So these are some small deviations you can find in almost all languages. I'm talking about pronunciation. And these also exist in English. Species or species. Therefore, you have to show that you are aware of all these deviations, these nuances in pronunciation, so that you'll give the examiner the impression that your pronunciation can be 9. Now, there are a lot of other things you can pay attention to while you're studying pronunciation. Things such as the lax and tense pronunciations of function words, such as to, of, from, and stuff like that. For example, consider the sentence, one of the most important, or saying one of the most important. So that of is pronounced lax. I mean, it's called lax pronunciation of that of. And for example, you can pay attention to the pronunciations of L and R in English in order to reduce, as much as possible, reduce the influence of your mother tongue. Of course, there are a lot of other things you can pay attention to, which are going to be probably described in our next videos. Now, our next tip is grammatical range and accuracy, and according to this, which is IELTS speaking band descriptors, if you want to get a 9 in grammatical range and accuracy, you have to use a full range of structures naturally and appropriately. Pay attention. Naturally is very important. I mean, the word naturally, because it is repeated a lot in band score 9. Now, you have to try, as I said, a full range of structures. Structures such as clauses, like noun clauses, adverbial clauses, adjective clauses, and their reduced forms. Perfect tenses, present perfect, future perfect, past perfect, and their continuous forms. Passive voice is very important. Inversions, but inversions are very tricky. You have to pay close attention to them because if you do not use them naturally, they can have adverse effects. And a lot of other structures that you have to pay attention to, such as comparative structures, in order to compare different times, different locations, different, let's say, subjects. And yeah. Well, it's not like that, because there are a lot of other structures that you have to use, and they're going to be elaborated upon in our following videos. Now, our next tip is on the accuracy of the grammatical structures that you use. This means regardless of the complex grammatical structures that you use, you have to pay attention to the accuracy. And you have to know that there is something called slips. Even with slips, sometimes you can get a 9. This means when you're presenting a wide range of complex grammatical structures, when you make a mistake, a small error, let's say, one of my friends, this is not a big deal because this can be considered a slip. But then there are some bigger mistakes, such as wrong use of tenses, verb tenses. Then these can be a little problematic. Now, according to IELTS speaking band descriptors, The next criterion is lexical resource, and if you want to get a 9, you have to try to use idiomatic language naturally and accurately. We already had a video on idiomatic expressions, and you can refer to that if you want to know more about it. But what I want to emphasize here is the fact that you have to try to be as natural as possible. For example, in Farsi, nobody says something like تو سنگ کیو داری به سینه میزنی.
Oh, look at that. Just imagine it in English. Whose stone are you pounding on your chest?
تو که سنگ صبور من بودی الهی سرت به سنگ بخوره.
I can't believe this. You were my patient stone. God willing, your head hits a rock.
So this is very unnatural. You know what I mean? The same goes with English. You have to try, you should not, let's say, you must not force these idiomatic expressions into your sentences, because that kind of gives the impression that they are unnatural and you have memorized them in order to use them in your speaking. Now, our next tip is topic-specific vocabulary. If you want to get a better score, you have to try to learn that you can use vocabulary with full flexibility and precision in all topics. That means you should not just learn vocabulary, you have to try to learn them thematically. And if you want to know more about it, you can watch our previous video on vocabulary. I know you're going to ask a lot of questions about the resources, but you should know that there are a lot of books which teach you vocabulary thematically. For example, you can go for vocabulary in use or Oxford Word Skills, and a lot of other ones which are in the market. Now, paraphrasing is another tip I'm going to talk about. If you want to get a better score, you have to try to show that you are able to paraphrase. But paraphrasing in higher scores does not only mean changing the vocabulary in a sentence. You should try to use various forms of language in order to get a better score in Lexical Resource. Getting a 9 in IELTS is like a roller coaster ride. But at the end of the day, it is possible. So I wish you luck with your ride.
خانه آیلتس آفرینش، تنها مرکز تخصصی دوره‌های آیلتس در ایران. www.afarinesh.org